present our guest speaker for today. And she's one of us. She's an alumna of City College, I think I mentioned in the past. So we are very proud of her. She's come out with a novel. She's a known playwright, and she's presented plays and written plays. And then we had a few of her plays have been presented at Yogi Rivera in regular season runs. So without further ado, I'm very honored and very happy to welcome back a alumna, Cecilia Garland.
Thank you. Thank you, Leo. So I want to thank all of you for coming here today, taking time from such a beautiful weather outside and being here in this classroom. But thank you so much. And I want to thank the Philippine Studies Program under the able leadership of Leo Paz. Leo Paz and I go back a long way when I was a student here at City College, and I was an adult student, okay? And I learned my craft here at City College. I actually took a novel playwriting class from Daniel Curzon Brown. I think he just retired. And to take up novel writing, because I was in a period of my life where I had a lot of grief and I needed an outlet. So my friend said, why don't you put it in writing? So I enrolled in the class, not knowing that the first half of the class was playwriting. And I didn't know a thing about playwriting. I didn't know what a proscenium stage was. And I was so daunted because most of the students were actors or playwrights or directors. But, so I remember the first class. So he said, why don't you write a synopsis of a scene that you want to write? And so, okay, I wrote something very autobiographical. So the following class, he read it. He said, oh my God, this is just too melodramatic. You know, it's like, I can't believe this happened. And I didn't want to say, oh, but it's true. That's my life you're talking about. And then, so I said, oh, I'm gonna do a scene every week. And by the end of the semester, I finished a play, which was never done. It had a stage reading, but it was never done. But from then on, I took classes in film, in directing, in acting. And so this is where City College is where I learned my craft. And I'm so grateful to the professors here, and you are all so lucky because you have some of the finest, and I mean some of the finest teachers, professors in the country, not just the state, but the country. So take advantage, take this opportunity to learn because you are in a really good place. So, so with that, I'm gonna start my presentation. So as I said, I'm so grateful to City College for those who just came in. And In Her Mother's Image, this is actually my first novel. And the genesis of the book is it started as a screenplay. Started as a screenplay. I couldn't sell it, but a reviewer from a major studio said it would make a good book. So I immediately wrote the book, not knowing how difficult it is to write a book, or 99% actually is promotion. So if you're going to write a book, please bear in mind that 99% of a book success is promotion. And then, but it sat there for so long because nobody wanted to touch it. You know, it's a novel, it's a mother-daughter story. It's a story of a mother and daughter, Consuelo and Chiquita. Chiquita is an 8-year-old child when the war happens, December 8, 1941 in the Philippines. So it's about their relationship. It's a love-hate relationship and the ramifications of war, how the war affected Chiquita 30 years later when she goes back to the Philippines. So the book reads like a screenplay, goes back and forth. It starts actually in 1971, which is the present in the book, when she goes back to the Philippines. And then it goes back and forth to the war when she was a child. And so she was an 8-year-old child. So the war is seen through the eyes of an 8-year-old child. And then, so there are many characters in the book. It's the story of the De Los Reyes family. The story is fiction. I made up the story. It's a historical fiction. But I was inspired to write the book based on the many stories that I heard from my parents while growing up. My father, one second. That's my dad. He was drafted in the U.S. Armed Forces of the Far East when he was 21, maybe 3 months short of 22. I think like in September or August 1941. And the U.S. Armed Forces of the Far East was formed under orders of President Roosevelt because there was a war. They were expecting a war with Japan, and the war in Europe was raging on. So that was formed in the Philippines. The Philippines was then a Commonwealth, and General Douglas MacArthur was given the task of forming this army, of mobilizing this army. So, when I was growing up, he used to tell us stories about the war, but his take on his experiences, he's now 92, he's still alive, and he's still macho. So his take was how he outwitted the Japanese. But little did I know that there were so many horrific stories out there. And now that I'm doing the presentations, I'm learning so much more about the horrors of war. And war is always horrific, whether Japanese, whatever, wherever it is. And I think the most damage is done to the children, as in the case of Chiquita, because they do not have the defense mechanisms to cope with the atrocities of war. And sometimes they carry it with them to adulthood. And like Chiquita, she becomes an adult, but she's never able to form like a permanent, lasting relationship. And I think it's from what she saw during the war, what she saw her mother do to survive. So anyway, and while I was doing the readings, I found out that not too many people in this country, I don't know if it's generational or what, but they don't know about the Bataan Death March. Who among you know about the Bataan Death March? Oh, good. It's actually good because I was just in Hawaii last week, and I think there were a handful of people who raised their hands, and most of them were above 40. But it's good that you know. So were any of you born in the Philippines? Oh, okay. So you know what it's like to be in the Philippines during the height of summer? Yes? So, because the fall of Bataan took place on April 9, 1942. But I'll go into that much later. So as I was reading the book, as I told you, as I was doing my presentations, I realized that there is a need to create awareness of this very important event. So without much ado, I will start with the present, which is 1971. I will start the book. But let me give you the trailer from the book to give you a flavor of what the novel is like.
Once in Royal David City stood a lowly cattle shed.
December 1941. Blistering winds from the South China Sea sway the giant coconut trees lining the pristine beach, while the foam of crashing waves melds with the fine white sand. Darkness creeps into the skies, heralding an impending tropical storm on this December morning. The droning gusts turn somber as the skies open up, yielding a sea of planes emblazoned with the crimson symbol of the rising sun. One by one, in perfect formation, they descend swiftly on this bucolic town like a swarm of hornets about to prey. A child's tiny feet trample madly on the powdery sand, racing with the wild beating of her heart. Her breathing becomes more rapid, each gasp turning shallow and frantic as the invading horde casts its dark shadow from above. Suddenly, an ear-piercing sound is heard, like an echo of a desperate woman wailing in pain. December 1971. Chiquita bolts up in bed, clutching her chest in pain as she gasps for air. Beads of cold perspiration trickle down her face while her body dampens her bed sheets on this cold December morning. The alarm clock has gone off with the same piercing sound that has been etched in the back of her mind for most of her life. For a few unguarded moments, she is unsure of time and place, as her heart still reels from the terror of her nightmare. Only when she sees her reflection in the mirror, with circles around her eyes and wisp of her short hair sticking out of place, does she realize that she is safe in the comfort of her dark and tiny abode in the middle of Manhattan. The sound of garbage trucks and garrulous men banging and emptying the tin containers outside somehow give her a fleeting sense of relief that the dream happened many years ago, 30 years to be exact, in the land of her birth, many thousand miles away, when her rose-colored world was shattered by the arrival of World War II, a war that claimed the lives of her loved ones and created within her a wound so deep that it has festered through the passage of time. She turns off the alarm clock and rests her head back on her pillow, only to be filled with thoughts of her childhood. It has been 4 months since the day she received that phone call from her beloved sister Angelina, informing her of their mother's brush with a stroke. Since then, her dreams have started recurring, becoming more palpable with each passing day. And today, in a few hours, she will be boarding the plane that will whisk her back to the land of her birth. In less than 24 hours, the cold, frosty winds will turn warm and humid when she sets foot in the small, sleepy town of Ilaya, in a tiny corner of the main island of Luzon in the Philippines. Back to her ancestral home, back to the bosom of her 3 sisters, back to the painful memories of her childhood, back to her mother. The next chapter will be December 8, 1941. So, as I said, the characters in the book are fiction, but they're composites of people I have known, and the situations in the book are actually based on real life.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date that will live in infamy.
It was the feast of the Immaculate Conception of Mary, the Mother of Christ. The day in which the Lord chose Mary to become the Blessed Virgin Mother of His Son, preserving her intact from the stain of original sin, and therefore from the punishment of death. The day started at the crack of dawn. It was a holy day of obligation observed by all good Catholics. The entire family, including servants, faithfully went to church to hear Mass and to receive the Lord's blessings. After breakfast, Chiquita managed to slip away unnoticed and headed for the beach in search of seashells. She had prided oddly shaped seashells, and today was an exceptional day, for her basket was brimming. Only the tiny grumblings in her stomach remind her that it's almost lunchtime. Her stride hastens as she imagines the crunchy fried chicken, melting in her mouth. She stops momentarily to wade in the warm water to wash away the tiny beads of sand prickling in between her toes. Suddenly, she feels a chill in her bones as a cold wind appears from nowhere, creating tiny goosebumps on her bare shoulders. Darkness creeps into the skies, and the droning gust turns somber. She turns her head up into the sky to look for the rain clouds shrouding the last vestige of sunlight. Instead, she sees a sea of plains in perfect formation, emblazoned with the crimson symbol of the rising sun. Her mouth becomes parched as her heart sinks and her entire body becomes limp. Her hand loses its grip on her precious bucket, sending its contents crashing to the ground, smashing some of her newfound shells into pieces. The deafening sound of the town's siren wails across the land, propelling her tiny feet to trample madly on the powdery sand. Like a bird fleeing from a nest of hornets, she dashes in the direction of her house, which is seemingly a million miles away. A booming sound stops her in her tracks, and she instinctively reaches for the ground. The thunderous explosions become more frequent, growing louder and closer by each sound. Chiquita covers her ears to drown out the sound, her heartbeat and shallow gasp for air melding with the blast. She tastes the salt of her tears as her mouth quivers uncontrollably. She hugs her knees tightly until her entire body feels like a block of wood. Suddenly, she feels the heat of the sun on her back, as if the rain clouds have disappeared. She looks up to see the clouds lifting, and for a moment or so, she wonders if it was all just a bad dream. But the piercing sounds of the sirens and the wails of the injured bring her back to reality. She wobbles as she stands up and starts to run with only the thought of her beloved home. As she turns a corner toward the main road, she sees black smoke billowing from the heart of town. The acrid smell of death becomes more palpable as she approaches her house. People of all ages scramble madly in all directions, either in search of help or their loved ones. Her thoughts are filled with dread as she prays to Mother Mary that her house be spared from carnage. Her heart stops when she sees her playmate's house as dark smoke swells from a hole in the roof. A wheelbarrow comes out of the smoke, laden with a man lying on top of it, with blood and guts spilling out of his fat belly. It is her playmate's father, Mr. Cruz, his eyes staring up to the heavens with nary a movement. So that was December 8, 1941, when the Japanese invaded the Philippines. Actually, it happened 9 hours after Pearl Harbor. But the planes sitting at Nichols Air Force Base, Zambales, and I think Clark were bombed. So a lot of the airplanes that we had were destroyed. And so this happened December 8th, 1941. And by January 1942, like midway 1942, the soldiers were already surviving on half rations. So we were clearly unprepared for a long battle with the Japanese. And number two, the resources that they were expecting were diverted to Europe. So the soldiers were subsisting on half rations between January and April. They managed to hold on till April 9, 1942. And by then, a lot of the soldiers were emaciated, dying of dysentery and hunger. Let me. And so by March, actually, what happened was we were so ill-prepared. January, they were living in half rations. By March, MacArthur was ordered to head to Australia So that was the famous that was the time when he said, "I shall return." Well, he did return several years later, but in the meantime, the soldiers were there. And General Edward King was in charge of Bataan. So Bataan was this peninsula, which is it northwest of Manila, Leo? Yes, it juts out into the China Sea, right? So, and Corregidor is an island off Bataan. So the soldiers were in Bataan. There were about 75,000 soldiers, about 60,000 Filipino soldiers under the U.S. Armed Forces of the Far East, and about 15,000 American soldiers holed up in Bataan. And the orders from President Roosevelt and MacArthur to General Wainwright, who was supervising General King, was fight to the death. And if there's any capitulation, any capitulation, it should be in the field of battle. But General Edward King knew, because all his forces were shot. There was no defense line. And so his only alternative was to surrender. He did inform Wainwright, but Wainwright refused, on the record, refused to acknowledge the order. But after many years later, Wainwright, of course, said he understood the situation of General King. And so General King was forced to surrender. He decided the evening of the 7th, and then the 8th, he sent Colonel Williams and Major Hurt with a white flag to go to the Japanese command to surrender. And before the surrender, they destroyed all the available artillery that was left. I think there were even ships that were destroyed. And so the surrender was made to General Kamichiro Nagano and Colonel Matoo Nakayama on April 9, 1942. And there were, as I said, about 17,000 Americans and about 60,000 Filipinos. Now, the Japanese were totally unprepared for the surrender, because this was the biggest defeat in U.S. military history. I don't know if you know about that, but this is the biggest defeat. And more people died during the march, as they were not able to transport these prisoners to the prison camp in Camp O'Donnell and Cabanatuan, 60 miles away. The prisoners, most of whom who were sick, were forced to march under searing heat, no provisions for water, food, shelter, or medicine. And a lot of them, about between 10 to 15,000 Filipinos and about 1,000 in total, about 15,000 soldiers died during the march. And that's why it became infamously known as the Bataan Death March. More casualties died during that march than Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor, there were 2,500 troops who died during the bombing of Pearl Harbor. But this is the largest surrender in American military history. But worse things were about to come, because there were even more deaths and atrocities at Camp O'Donnell. So my father survived the death march, and he was fortunate enough to survive Camp O'Donnell, because inside Camp O'Donnell, there were no provisions for medicine. The only food they could get was runny porridge, no medicine. He became part of the guava detail, which gathered guava leaves, because those were the only herbs that they could use to treat dysentery. So I'll read a chapter from June 1942. So my father, like most those who survived the Bataan Death March, was in Camp O'Donnell from April till mid to late August 1942. So the Filipinos were released under conditional guarantee of the governors of the provinces where they lived. And the American prisoners, however, were shipped to Japan, where they became slave laborers. So I'll be reading from June 1942. So at this time, the father, Jose de los Reyes, is in Camp O'Donnell looking for his son. He didn't know if his son survived the death march. And the camp was huge, thousands, as you can imagine, thousands of prisoners were in there. So in the household are the women. Consuelo, the mother, Chiquita, who's the youngest, and Nanay, who's the nanny, and there's 3 other sisters, Angelina, Victoria, and Mercedes. And it's an upper middle class family. They're landed. They own a hacienda, which is a huge tract of land, which was inherited from the family of the father. So June 1942. The bedroom is pitch black, but signs of life stir outside. Strange voices of men speaking in an alien tongue emanate from the darkness, bursting into boisterous laughter, growing louder with each passing second.
What do we have?
Lights filter through the shutters
know
of
what
the
we've
window.
been looking for. I think this is a hell lot better than what we're looking for. That stupid old bitch. I swear I could have beaten her to a pulp if she didn't stop me. She bit me like a rabid dog the moment we got in. Look at this. For a moment there, I thought I was seeing my dad back home. Now I'd have her if you can have the kid. Hey, hey. Share and share alike. The more the merrier. Get up! Get up! 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 Ah, why, Lee? Lee, please, don't hurt her. Please. God damn it. Come here, you little bitch! Well, Chiquita, leave her alone. I'll do anything you want. Stop it. 2 times bitten in one day. No wonder you're turning into a rabid dog. Oh, come here, you little bitch. Come here.
What is the meaning of this?
Yoshi. Yoshi.
Remember, you are a soldier of the Japanese Imperial Army, not an animal.
Yes, sir.
I put that bayonet down. There's no need for that. I apologize profusely, Miss De Los Reyes, for this barbarous act.
It's Yoshi.
It's Yoshi. What? Asked the perplexed Angelina.
Save us from the
The
enemy.
ice cream man. Ate, he'll save us from the enemy.
Did they
He's my
hurt you?
friend. Shh.
Ladies, I apologize for any inconvenience we have caused you tonight, especially for the barbarous acts of a few men, none of which will go unpunished, I assure you. But we were told by our sources that your husband is an American spy and he keeps in touch with the enemy through a shortwave radio.
But Captain, that is a lie. My husband was a justice of the peace, an American civil servant, never a spy.
But where is he, madame?
In Capas, at the concentration camp, looking for my son. But I assure you, Captain, my husband is not an American spy.
Our sources tell us that he lived in the United States and that
He was merely a student. He's no more an American spy than you are. I was told that you yourself was a student in America.
that is true. But you and your family live like Americans. You speak like them. You dress like them. You eat like them. And
But Captain, the Philippines was an American colony. We were just being good citizens. Now that you are here, we'll try our best to learn your ways. Though so. Captain, we could not find the shortwave radio. We searched all over.
Madam, it would save us time and unnecessary effort if you could just hand over that radio.
Captain, if I have it, I will hand it to you right this minute. I will not endanger the lives of my family just for a piece of equipment.
Then I must ask you, Madam, to please let your husband know that he must report to headquarters as soon as he arrives.
Of course, as soon as he arrives.
Order the men to start the search and wait outside.
Captain, if there is any need that you may need or your men need, please do not hesitate to let me know. Our house is your house.
Again, thank you, Mrs. De Rosales, and I apologize for any inconvenience we caused you.
Yoshi? Are you not really an ice cream man? Are you one of them? Are you my enemy?
I am not your enemy.
Liar! You just pretended to be my friend. All that ice cream you gave me, I really thought you did it because you liked me. You just wanted to spy on us. Liar!
But I am.
I'm sorry, Captain Tanaka.
But I am your friend, Chiquita. And believe me, I do like you very much. War is such an awful thing. I am a soldier. I have a duty to my country, my family. Sometimes I do things I do not want. I hope that you still can have ice cream with me someday. When the war is over.
In the interest of time, I will read the next chapter. And this is when the son, Pepito, comes home. Pepito is the only male heir to the De los Reyes family. He was 19 when he was drafted. And this is a scene when he describes his ordeal during the Bataan Death March. I'm sticking to the war years here in observance of the Bataan Death March. The fall of Bataan this year will mark its 70th anniversary on April 9, 2012. So it's important for us to commemorate this event, and hopefully you will spread the word to let people know of the sacrifices of both American and Filipino soldiers. And also, before I forget, in 1946, the war ended in 1945. In 1946, President Harry Truman signed the Rescission Act, which rescinded all the rights of the U.S. Armed Forces troops who fought during the war. So until now, 70 years later, the soldiers of the U.S. Armed Forces of the Far East have not received equal rights as their American counterparts. So that's one thing that I want you to know. So this is the scene when Pepito comes home, August 1942. And so, let me read. Chiquita stands close to Pepito as she brushes his hair. Angelina puts her arms around Chiquita, who starts to cry. It's all right, Chiquita. He'll be all right now. He's not the same, Ate. He's not, softly cries Chiquita. We can't expect him to stay the same, says Jose, as he leans on the bedpost, his eyes weary from days and nights of worry and anxiety. Not after what he went through. I saw how those boys suffered, Filipinos and Americans. It didn't matter what color they were. They were starved and tortured day after day until their will to live was taken away from them. They died faster than they could bury them, and the men who buried the dead would no sooner follow. Angelina, calls Pepito in a whisper. Angelina sits closely beside Pepito and holds his hand. Pepito can hardly open his leaden eyes as he speaks in his barely inaudible voice. Ate, Nestor and I, we were together during the march. So Nestor is Angelina's sweetheart. Shh, don't talk now, you must rest. But you must listen, gasped Pepito, please. He was the one who kept me alive during that long, unbearable march to Camp O'Donnell. People were dropping like flies, and all I wanted to do was to drop on the ground and sleep forever. But he didn't let me. I would have been instantly shot if I had fallen on the wayside. But Nestor, he kept on talking to me to keep me awake. All the time he was talking about how much he loved you, that one day all of us will be together again, and that this nightmare would just be a forgotten memory. He kept on telling me that I'd better stay alive, for I would be the godfather of all your children, all 5 of them. But one day, Pepito breaks down, choking in his own tears. One day, one of those dirty Japs threw a ball of rice on us. Ate, we had not eaten for days. The only water we could drink was from the puddles on the side of the road. That rice, it was like manna from heaven. The men jumped and scampered for every tiny kernel of rice that landed on the ground. But as soon as that happened, those filthy swines fired in all directions. I knew that Nestor was hit instantly, for I could see blood coming out of his chest. Pepito cries as his body and soul are racked in pain. Oh, Ate, I tried to help him, but those fucking devils, they would not even let me touch him, not even to put him on the side of the road to die a decent death. Oh, Ate, I'm so sorry. Angelina can only nod her head, her tears joining Pepito's in grief. But she also knew that she was there not to mourn for Nestor, but to bring life to her beloved brother. So that's the end of the presentation. We have 10 minutes for Q&A. So the book is available. Actually, I have some books here. It's also available on Amazon and Archipelago Books, Eastwind Books, and I think Philippine Expressions. So if you're interested. But I want you to leave this room knowing of the sacrifices of your ancestors or basically of the Filipino and American troops. And because it's easy to forget that we are here, we are a peaceful nation now, but in the shores of the Philippines, in the shores of Hawaii, in the shores of Asia and Europe, people died in the cause of freedom.